So we'll start off by applying all our skills to pivot tables. Then we'll move on to discover exactly what a histogram is. And last but not least, we'll explore multi-level processes. So let's get started. In our first topic for this lesson, we will have a look at pivot tables. We'll be focusing on sorting and filtering, and hopefully by the end of this lesson, you will all be experts. We'll use a few different examples so we can see it all in action. But the main idea is to get you used to working with pivot tables and used to sorting and filtering through different pieces of information in order for you to create the best reports possible. So we'll actually be able to see how much information we can get from these two simple features. So let's jump straight over to Excel and see this in action. So here we have a list of the students' results for 3 different exams. We have the math score, the reading score, as well as the writing score. And then there's also a lot of other information too, such as their gender, their race, parental level of education, lunch, and if they did the test preparation course too. Now remember, you can simply add your filters to the top and you're able to sort whether they're male or female or many other different options. But we're going to go into a little bit more detail than just simply filtering from the headings themselves. So for example, we can see, do the students have higher scores due to the level of education of their parents? Maybe because they're male or female. And if both statements are correct, which students did take the test preparation course and got higher scores too? So from a data set like this, of course, you already can see that you can make many other hypotheses. You can test them and make a data set out of it. If we use our arrows, press Ctrl, and our down arrow, we can already see that there's 1,000 students. Remember, it's not 1,001, because if we use our Ctrl and arrow button once again, the top is your heading. So I always like to bold my heading just to help me not get confused. So now we can see if there's any missing data. So you can scroll through all of your data to make sure that there's no blank areas. When you're quite confident that there are no blanks, then you can create your pivot table. So clicking on any cell within the table, we go to Insert. From Insert, we insert our pivot table. When we want to insert our pivot table, we need to make sure that our range or our table is the correct range. Then we can select New Worksheet and it will move it all over to a brand new workspace. Now you can already see on the screen, there's not much for us to work with. So let's start by dragging gender into the rows column, and you can already see something starting to happen. Then we'll use test preparation and drag that into the values column. And here we can see whether most males or females actually took the test preparation course. But remember, we still have that grand total of 1,000. So that means that we can already conclude that all the students had taken the test preparation course. So now this doesn't really make sense, because we already know from our data set that not all the students did complete the course. So that means some of our fields are missing. So remember, in order to see who completed the course or not, we need to take the test preparation course into our filters too. And from there, we're able to filter exactly who completed it and who didn't complete. Here we can see that 184 females completed it and 174 males completed it. That gives us a grand total of 358 individuals who actually completed the test preparation course. Now, to make it a little bit more interesting, we can always drag the parental level of education into our filters field too, and this gives us another type of filter. Here we can see all 6 categories, whether the parents have an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, high school degree, master's degree, maybe some college degree, or even some high school degree. So this means if we select one of them, we can also conclude a lot more statistics and see if the parents' level of education actually affect the scores of the students. But before I continue, I would like to emphasize knowing your data. In some countries, you may be very familiar with an associate's degree, and in other countries, you may be more familiar with a bachelor's degree. I will always encourage you to do your research to make sure that you understand all of your data clearly. So far we've looked at 2 different variables. And of course, we have many different variables and many different options which we can also look at. So for another example, let's say we want to know exactly what the math score was, and we drag it into our filters list. Now, when we have the math score, let's say we want to see all of the students who got above 90%. So we don't want all of the information. We can scroll down and just simply select the boxes that are above 90. And this will give us a better reading and a better understanding of our data. Now, how many students do you think already off the top of your head simply got over 90? If you have an answer, let's see if you're correct. There was only 1 female and 1 male. Now, you can do the same for all of the different other exams too. So simply, you can also move the math score over to the rows field. Or you can move the reading score over to the filters, and there's so many different options. So by simply just viewing all of this different information, you can just imagine that you are able to create many different reports. But there's also another easier way. Instead of dropping and dragging all of your things into the different fields, you can simply go over to Pivot Table Analyze, and from here we can add our slices. In the filter section, you have Insert Slicer. So let's say for our example, we want to know the gender, the parental education, test preparation, and the math score. Simply click OK. Once we've clicked all our filters and we're quite happy with the 4 different topics we want to look at, a little bit easier for us to select what we want. So let's say for a change we want females. We want to see if their parents have a bachelor's degree, whether they did not complete the test preparation course, and if they got anywhere higher than 90. And here we can see 97 and 98 already. But to make it interesting, we also want to know about 86. So as you can see, instead of dropping and dragging all your information into the pivot table fields, when you create your slices, you're able to quickly move through a different piece of information and analyze it at a faster rate. But now that we know a little bit more about how to use our pivot tables, let's go back to modifications. So in the second topic of this lesson, we'll continue to work with our pivot tables, but this time we'll be focusing on the grouping features, grouping items, as well as dates. We will have a look at how we can transform all our numeric data into a histogram. So today we'll be focusing on 3 main modifications. Firstly, grouping products. And this allows us to classify information in 1 or more categories. Then grouping dates, which allows us to classify dates into 1 or more categories. And lastly, we'll also be looking at a histogram. This is normally used in statistical analysis and refers to the distribution of numerical data. It allows us to visualize our values graphically for a numerical value. Now let's jump straight into all of these different modifications to see exactly what they can do. First and foremost, we're going to start off with grouping items. So here we have a list of countries in Asia and their populations in 2020. The goal is to group the information by the sub-region. So we can select any of the cells on the second list, go to our Insert tab, go back to our pivot tables. Now that we know that the range is correct, click OK and it opens it up in a brand new sheet. We'll drag country into our rows field, and then we'll drag population into our values field. And now here you can see that we have the rows as well as the populations. So let's say, for example, you also want to know which population has the highest number of people or which number is the smallest. By simply sorting your information, you can already get a lot of information to create a report simply through sorting. But let's say for our example today, we want to add classifications. So let's just keep our sorting A to Z nice and easy. So we can select any cell and right click. Here you can see the group and the ungroup options. Remember, today we're going to be focusing on grouping and ungrouping. So if you select a cell in your second column, interestingly enough, you see you don't have the same options there. So you won't be able to group it by the numbers, as of course, our main titles are the countries' names. So let's just select a few, and let's just say that they are in one of the sub-regions of Asia. Now that we're happy with those countries, we can simply right-click and select Group, and we'll create Group 1. Now, the second thing is, if you have a look in our panel, you can see that now we have another option, and it's called Country 2. This time, we're going to drag Country 2 over to our Filters field. So we can change our name of Country 2, and let's just say Sub for a different sub-region. And we can also change the name of Group 1 by simply selecting Group 1, clicking OK, and then changing the group from there. This time, we'll just say Test, and clicking OK. Once we click OK, it will say, no item of this name exists in a pivot table report. Rename Group 1 to Test. And if you're happy with this, simply click OK. Now you can see that we've changed the different names, so even when we have our pivot table analysis open, it will say sub-region as well as country or test, instead of just simply having Group 1, Group 2, or Group 3. Remember, at any time you can also ungroup your information. So by clicking on the table, click Ungroup, and it will ungroup the different areas, bringing them back into the same format as which they were before. But now that we've had a look at how we can group different products or items, let's have a look at how exactly we can group different dates. Now, grouping dates is very similar, so you might get the hang of it relatively easy. Here we can see a list of movies which are all available on Netflix. Now, the most important information for our example is found in column M, as we want to group the different dates. Now remember, you can also sort the dates, but you have to make sure that firstly, you have a table. Otherwise, if you sort the dates, it's not going to correspond with the movie title. But you can simply do this by clicking on your sort and filter option. Clicking on it, you can either sort it from oldest to newest or newest to oldest. But of course, we are looking at creating a pivot table, so let's select all our information by pressing Ctrl A. From here, we go to our Insert tab, and we want to insert a pivot table. Once you've selected your pivot table, you'll see your data range appear on the screen, and press OK. Now this takes us to a brand new workbook. So first, we want to create our pivot table so that we can see the date which is added, and this will take to the rows column. And then for another example, we can always use the titles and place that in our values. Now automatically, with our version of Excel, you can see that it's divided into years as well as into quarters. So it's grouped everything already for us. But we want to see exactly how we can do this ourselves. So we're going to right click on the table and say Ungroup. And this is going to give us our list once again of all the different dates. And then we'll see there's only going to be one title corresponding to each date. But if we want to group it in our own way, we can always right click on the information and go over to grouping. Once you've selected grouping, there are other options here. So you can either group it by seconds, minutes, hours, days, or month, or many more. So for example, we want to say we want to group each by every year. Another advantage is that you can also group it starting with a starting date or with an ending date. You can select it or unselect it too. So we just, for our example, going to group it within our years, and then we press OK. And once again, we can see the grouping has taken place. But it's vital to remember, when we are grouping dates, we need to make sure that the cells are formatted in the date format. Otherwise, if it's in another format, then Excel will not be able to group the cells according to what you would like them to be. So now that we know exactly how we can group our data according to product as well as according to dates, let's move on to see exactly how we can use histograms. So a histogram is used in a statistical analysis and refers to distribution of different numerical data. It is extremely helpful when we have a column with numerical values, and we need to visualize this graphically. So here we still have our same example from all the movies from 2016 to 2021. Even though they're grouped, we can still create a histogram from this. So we can simply do this by right-clicking on any cell on the table. From here, you have your option Summarize Values By, and choosing the Count option. Now we already know that our values are summarized, so we can simply go to our pivot table analysis and go to the Tools group. Here we can select Pivot Chart, and we'll select the first one just for this example. And here you can simply see how many movies were released each and every year. Remember, you can keep manipulating this data exactly how you need to visualize it, and this way you can create the best report. So whether you like to group your information, ungroup your information, or even use different colors. Grouping data can be extremely helpful when it comes to creating those reports. So make sure you either group it by the date or by the product, and you can also create your histogram just to add that extra effect. Now this brings us to our last topic for today's lesson, and we'll be moving on to dimensions. We will review multiple levels in a pivot table. We'll also look at multiple levels in different areas. And lastly, we'll finish off by looking at multiple report filters. So firstly, multiple levels. Instead of doing it from a list or a table, and it helps us to sort and filter through all our information. Multiple fields in value areas improve the performance of our layouts, and it gives us many options and different visualizations for our information. And last but not least, the multiple report filter can generate more than one report at a time, so this increases our efficiency in our activities too. So let's start off by looking at the multiple level. So here we have a whole list of countries, and we'd like to create a pivot table, but this time we're going to do it slightly differently. We're going to use an alternative layout in order to visualize your pivot table instead of dropping and dragging the different fields. So we'll start off by selecting all the information, Control A. Going over to Insert, selecting your pivot table. Once you're happy with your range, click Alright. Now you can see that you have your different fields available to you, but like we said, we want to do it a little bit differently. So click on any cell within the block and right-click. Here we have the option Pivot Table Options. In your pivot table options, if you go to display, you'll see you can select the option of classic pivot table layout. Check the box and click OK. Now you can already start visualizing what your pivot table will look like. So let's say, for example, you'd want to put countries in your main list. And let's say we want to have the sub-region as our filter field at the top. So this is a nice and easy way in order for us to see exactly what our table is going to look like, instead of trying different fields and figuring out how we would like the information to be displayed. And now this brings us to our next topic. We're going to have a look at multiple fields in value areas. So using the information we already have, let's see how multiple fields in value areas work. So we're going to deselect all our information. So we want the population according to country, continent, sub-region, and of course, we want to make sure we have the total value of the populations. So here you can see it's grouped in multiple different levels. Now the best part is if you go to pivot table analysis and you work with your group selection, you can either expand or collapse all your information. And it will collapse the information according to the different filters which you have applied, or exactly where you've put all your information. Now remember, this can be done in the pivot table analysis, or it can also be done by right-clicking and collapsing and expanding either the entire field, or you can also collapse and expand according to the different filters which you have chosen. So this brings us to our last topic for today, a multiple report filter. So we'll have a look at how we can use all our countries and create multiple reports by simply a couple of clicks of the button, instead of clicking one by one. So in the first column, we have all our countries, and they're grouped depending on their continents. The second column here contains a population, and each of the total population by its continent. So remember, if we go over to our pivot table analysis, we can collapse and expand the different fields in order to see the different regions. But now, let's say we want to create a different report according to the sub-region. So you can either click on the different sub-regions, but unfortunately, if we have to go select every single sub-region and go copy and paste, it's going to take a very long time. But there's no need to worry, there's another option which you can use. So instead we're going to create multiple reports by going to the pivot table analysis. Here we can see the pivot table option, click on there, and options, click on the drop-down list. Here we have the option to show report filter pages and click OK. Here, as our filter is our sub-region, it will show all the reports for our different filters. Once we're satisfied, click OK. And as you can see right at the bottom, it's created a report for every single sub-region. So instead of you doing it by yourself manually, it's simply done it for you. But now, as we said, there's so many different sub-regions. So if you quickly want to navigate between the different tabs and make sure you're finding the right one, you can always right-click. And as you right-click, it easily shows you exactly which tab you would like to navigate to. So today we've had a look at multiple ways in which we can use pivot tables. Now remember, practice makes perfect. So for your lesson challenge today, I'd like you to analyze the remainder of the student reports and to create a histogram for them. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson as much as I have. And practice your pivot tables. The more you practice, the easier it'll become. And see how much fun Excel really can be. See you next time.